Kreidberg. I'm a grad student at the University of Chicago, and today I'm going to be talking about intensive characterization of the atmospheres of some hot Jupiters. Can everybody hear me? Should I stay closer to the mic? Good? Okay, thank you. So first, I'd like to acknowledge some of my collaborators, in particular my advisor, Jacob Bean, as well as Mike Lyon, who's responsible for all the modeling work that I'm going to show today, and Kevin Stevenson, who's a SAGIT fellow with us, who I've worked with extensively on the project. But first, I want to interrupt our scheduled programming to make a brief advertisement of CodedI Breakfast. This is a Python package to do very fast calculation of transit light curves. It's the badass transit model calculation. I just really wanted to call it Big Batman. And I'm developing it on GitHub. It implements a new algorithm that I came up with to compute transit light curves for any radially symmetric Bloom-Darkman law, and this is 100 times faster than the manual enable Fortran routine to calculate nonlinear Bloom-Darkman. So I'll make a deal with you. I want to make sure this code is working for people. It's up on GitHub. If you download it and install it and run some tests as per the README, if you have constructive feedback or something doesn't work for you, I'll buy you a beer tonight or Thursday. Okay, so back to what I'm supposed to be talking about. There's a lot of reasons it's exciting to study the atmospheres of exoplanets, but one in particular is that the atmosphere provides a snapshot of the conditions in the protoplanetary disk where the planet formed. It's a direct probe of the disk chemistry and the relative accretion rates of gas versus isoplanetesimals. And so I want to present two case studies today where we've done very intensive observations of the planet's atmospheres that have allowed us to constrain their atmospheric composition. These results are from in a large treasury program on HST called Follow the Water, part of cycle 21. And so these are for two hot Jupiters. The first one I'll talk about is WASP-43b. This planet is a fairly run-of-the-mill hot Jupiter. It's 2 Jupiter masses, has an orbital period of about 24 hours. But the observations that we did of it are not run-of-the-mill. So I'll cut to the chase with our results here since the time is short. We measured very precise emission and transmission spectra for the planet. This comes from, I think, six transit observations and 5 eclipses. And so even with the extraordinary precision that HST affords, repeat transit observations are still required to get down to the level of precision we need to see these really tiny signals. And you can see in both cases we have very strong evidence of water absorption in the spectra. I'm marking a water band with the black bar. And I'll remind you that for transmission spectra, absorption is up because at wavelengths where the planet's atmosphere is more opaque, the stellar flux is blocked at higher altitudes, so the transit depth is larger. And I'm showing with the blue shading the results of a retrieval that we ran to characterize the atmospheric properties. And the way this works is that you effectively explore the parameter space of temperature, pressure profiles, and atmospheric composition that are a good fit to the data. And I'm showing the constraints on the water abundance that we get from this on the right. And it's really encouraging that we measure consistent water abundances between the emission spectrum and the transmission spectrum. These are independent data sets, and they're also probing distinct regions of the planetary atmosphere. So it's really awesome that we're able to get results that agree with each other. And we decided to combine them. The joint constraint on the water abundance of the planet is about 1/2 to 3.5 times solar at 1 sigma confidence. And we're excited about this because water is a really critical building block in the planet formation process. But even for the solar system gas giant planets, we don't have a good estimate of their water content because the water is condensed out of the observable parts of their atmospheres. And by contrast, hot Jupiters have such high temperatures that water is expected to be in the gas phase and well mixed. And so we can use these as a way to study the distribution of water abundances in giant planets in a way that we can't with the solar system. But we can compare with the solar system by using water as a proxy for the velocity of the atmosphere, and that's what I'm showing in this plot. And you can see that WASP-43b follows beautifully in line with the solar system trend of decreasing atmospheric metallicity with increasing planet mass. And I like this figure because I think it's illustrative of the potential that exoplanets hold. Because as you can see, there's only 4 giant planets in the solar system where we can make this measurement. But we now have the chance to make measurements for exoplanets that are precise enough for meaningful comparison with the solar system. And so ultimately what we'd like to do here is measure the metallicity for many, many exoplanets and use it to compare with planet populations in these models and tune those parameters and learn how planet formation works. Okay, so I want to switch gears now to WASP-12. This planet is also a hot Jupiter. And you may have heard of it. It's the best example we have of a carbon-rich exoplanet atmosphere. And when I say carbon-rich, I mean it has more carbon atoms than oxygen. And this is highly unusual. As John introduced in his talk earlier, most stars have carbon-to-oxygen ratios in the neighborhood of 0.5. And so for a planet to have a C to O ratio greater than 1 would suggest it has a very unusual formation pathway. And so this was first suggested for WASP-12 about 5 years ago, and the result has stuck around since then, which is really like an eternity in exoplanet atmospheres. It's a really fast-moving field. And it's been very influential in motivating observational programs to measure C to O for other exoplanets, as well as motivating theoretical work to understand how these planets might form. And so I decided to take a different approach to studying the planet. All these previous results were based on the planet's emission spectrum. And so what I did was to measure a very precise transmission spectrum for the planet, which I'm showing here. And you can see, just like for WASP-43b, we see a very, very clear water feature at 1.4 microns. This is 7 sigma evidence for water absorption, and we have uniquely identified water as the dominant absorbing species. And this was very surprising to us, because for a carbon-rich composition, you'd expect water to be depleted. All of the oxygen atoms are bound up in CO and CO2 at these high temperatures, and so it's very unusual to get a water feature like this for carbon-rich chemistry. And so we tried to get more quantitative with this. This is the results of a retrieval, again done by Mike Line, where I'm showing temperature on the x-axis and the water abundance on the y-axis with comparisons with theoretical models for chemical equilibrium predictions of the water abundance for different chemical compositions. So I'm showing an oxygen-rich model in blue. You can see that's a better fit to our data than a carbon-rich model in red. And anytime you have a slide with a title with a question mark, the answer is always no, right? So, but depending on some assumptions. So we wanted to explore this further, and we developed a new retrieval technique that, so traditional retrieval will, your inputs are molecular abundances and temperature and pressure, and you explore what range of those values gives you a good fit to the data. And we developed a new model that instead will fit for the C to O ratio directly, as well as the atmospheric metallicity. And the chemical abundances are computed based on equilibrium predictions. And when we do this, we looked at 2 different cases, one with a carbon-to-oxygen ratio restricted to less than 1, so low C to O, and the other where it was restricted to greater than 1. You can see that we can't get a good fit to our data with a carbon-rich model. And the reason for this is that to get water, you have to decrease the temperature in the atmosphere. That decreases the atmospheric scale height, so the features get smaller. And it also increases the abundance of methane, so you start seeing methane features pop up. And so based on this, we find that a C to O ratio greater than 1 is disfavored by about 1,000,000 to 1. And so this gives us pause, right? This planet was supposed to be high C to O. It's been a very influential result. Like, what is happening? And I'll say that a challenge in these types of analyses is that it's very difficult to infer simultaneously the atmospheric composition as well as the temperature pressure profile of the planet. And so a way forward here, a way to understand what's really going on with the planet is to study the entire planet, not just the transmission spectrum and the emission spectrum in isolation. And we had a pilot program for WASP-43b, so the first planet I talked about today, where we measured a phase-resolved emission spectrum with Hubble. So we observed a complete orbital revolution of the planet. And and measured its emission spectrum all the way around. So I have a movie showing what we got. So these are model fits to actual real data, and you can see you see the water feature. You can see how it changes as the planet's hot day side rotates in and out of view. You can see the constraints on the temperature pressure profile in the upper right. And this type of measurement for WASP-12 would allow us to totally break the degeneracy between the thermal structure of the atmosphere and its composition. And so this is a preview of the type of model we'd like to do, the type of observation we'd like to do to get really robust constraints on the atmosphere of these planets. I think I'm over time, so I'll end there. I'll take questions. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, so I thought the reason that people no longer think of the CO ratio was greater than 1 was because they weren't taking into account the M-orbital companions, and when they took that into account, it no longer is the case.
Right, so the question was the high C to O result potentially due to the fact that WASP-12 has a very faint companion star?
Right.
The most recent analysis was done by Kevin Stevenson. It was a 2014 paper, and that accounted for all of the highest precision data as well as correcting for the dilution due to the companion, and we found that carbon-rich models are still favored based on that. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the assumption of chemical equilibrium.
Yes.
How realistic do you think that is? And if you relaxed it, would it substantially change the answer?
Okay, that's a great question. And we talked about this extensively. The question was, how much does the assumption of chemical equilibrium matter? And I can point you to a recent paper by Bjorn Bennegram that introduced still another new retrieval parameterization that allowed him to calculate the effects of photochemistry and vertical mixing, and he included our WASP-12 data in his analysis and got the same result. So it's possible, so another reason to do a phase group observation is that would allow us to study the effects of horizontal transport due to zonal winds. But at this point, you're starting to invoke too many tooth fairies, right? Like when you assume that everything is it's too many assumptions to try to explain away this water that we're seeing. Yeah.
It looks like on the night side, there's a little bit of weak thermal inversion layer. It's a little warmer on the top in the cold when your movie goes to the
Like right here.
When it converts here.
Oh,
I'm just wondering what causes that slight temperature inversion?
I would say it's consistent with isothermals within the uncertainty in our data. Yeah, I would not do the thermal inversion based on that. Yeah.
So you had your syntax on one of your slides talking about retrieval of clouds and hazes for WASP-12P. Could you talk more about that?
Yeah, right. Including clouds is very important for this kind of modeling because clouds can truncate the amplitude of absorption features, and so there's degeneracy between the water abundance and the cloud properties. And so we explored a lot of different models, and eventually what we settled on was parameterization that included an opaque gray cloud depth, as well as a haze that was parameterized by a power law scattering amplitude. And Bjorn, in his new paper, included a more physically realistic model of clouds and found similar results. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So you're talking about the precision of water abundance measurement for WASP-43. It's from 0.5 to 3.5 solar abundance. And then you talk about the distribution of hot Jupiter water abundance. How does the distribution of water abundance constrain formation history of hot Jupiter? Do you have a plan, or how do you differentiate?
Yeah, so what we'd like to do is make quantitative comparison with planet population synthesis models. So like the more CD models, for example. And with the sample size that we have, it's not really possible yet. But if we got 10 planets, say, then we'd be able to start making meaningful tests of those models. One last question.
So the hot Jupiters are inflated, and we still do not know why they are. So could some of those processes actually affect the spectra and the retrieval.
Oh, yeah. So the question is the inflated radius of some of these planets affecting our results? I would say, I guess I would turn that question around and say, is there some selection effect? Like we're looking at planets that have inflated radii because they're better targets, and will that systematically impact the metallicity that we measure? The answer is maybe. I figured things get interesting. That I haven't thought too much about yet. Still early days. Okay.